Today's video is all about sweep picking, zero fluff, straight to the point. Here's what made this technique finally click for me after years of working on it in a very frustrated way. So first of all, what a lot of people neglect concerns the picking angle for every single string. I think most people know that sweep picking is all about not individually attacking the strings like this, so you're not playing a downstroke for every single string or an upstroke like that. You're of course going for a very fluid movement like this in order to really speed it up. You can speed up individual small strokes, but what a lot of people neglect is that one thing plays a crucial role right here when it comes to getting consistent results, and it's the picking angle for every single string. Because with sweep picking, you're usually just playing one note per string, sometimes 2 or 3 notes with pull-offs. So as opposed to other picking techniques like alternate picking, you're not really spending a lot of time on the individual strings. You're moving rapidly from string to string. And what unlocked this motion for me is realizing that I want the same kind of picking angle for every single string so that I get real consistent results with my sweep picking motion. Here's what I did wrong at the start. I put my palm on the bridge like this, which is good, but I anchored my palm and I followed the strings like this with this kind of arching movement. So for the lowest notes in my arpeggio, I had this kind of picking angle on the E or A string, and then as I was moving higher in the arpeggio, the picking angle changed completely to that. So this is how I started, this is how it ended. So it was a movement like this. It got me really sloppy results, just like that. Because picking each string felt completely different. There was no consistency right here, and sometimes I was arching a little bit more like this, sometimes a little bit less. What fixed this immediately was the approach of following the strings like this with my palm. So I'm still resting it on the bridge. It's not floating in the air like this. It's still resting on the bridge, but it's not anchored and in place. And I follow the strings just like this so that I get the same picking angle and the same technique for every single string. The next thing that really helped me out is working with 5-string arpeggios right away instead of just doing 3-string arpeggios at the start. It's often tempting because it feels logical to start out with 3-string arpeggios. They look smaller and less intimidating, right? But here's the thing, when you only play on 3 strings, you constantly have to turn around the picking direction. So right here, I have 2 upstrokes on the E and B strings, and then I have to immediately turn around the direction of the arpeggio with downstrokes on the G, B and E strings. So just 2 upstrokes, 3 downstrokes, and so on. So the direction turns around all the time, so you can't really internalize how it's supposed to feel like. But when you start out with bigger arpeggios, like the very common A minor shape that you're probably familiar with, you have much more time to internalize the movements. So that's another huge tip. Go for 5-string arpeggios right away. Even though they might look more intimidating, you will internalize the picking movement much better, as opposed to working with a shape where you constantly have to turn the direction around. And here's the next thing. I really wish I knew this earlier. Most players struggle with one of the directions more than with the other. What I mean by that, for some players, the upstroke movement, so descending in the arpeggio, is easier than the upstroke movement, so ascending in the arpeggio, while for other players it's the other way around. And I found over many years of working on this that the main reason for that is that the picking movement is very different for some people, because they start to work with one of those directions, then they learn the other one. So the picking angle and technique for the downstrokes might look like this. And then the upstroke angle, it looks completely different and feels completely different. So when I'm combining these 2 movements, you won't see a downstroke motion like this and then suddenly an upstroke movement like that. So it never looks like this when I'm going up and down an arpeggio. Something like that. You will see that both directions are very similar. So you might see a small change because I'm not gripping the pick really, really hard. So to make sure that it's super stiff like this all the time, I work with a very soft grip, as most of you know, and I'm very relaxed when I'm picking. So when I'm working with downstrokes and then with upstrokes in the other direction, there might be a subtle change just because I'm not gripping the pick super hard and I don't get those super stiff upstrokes. There might be a slight angle change like this. But what's important for me is that both these directions feel the same. Because in my experience, you can't really get a nice fluid arpeggio that goes up and down and changes the direction all the time if your downstroke and upstroke movement with sweep picking are completely different techniques. Speaking of an arpeggio that goes up and down and in different directions, one neat little trick that you can try that I sometimes use when things get crazy complicated and very fast is replacing some notes in an arpeggio with hammer-ons. Let's take the very common 3-string shapes, for example, where you would have to play those 2 upstrokes and then immediately switch to downstrokes. When that gets very fast, it might end up sounding sloppy like this, because the pick gets stuck and the transition feels awkward. If you're struggling with fast kind of string changes and directional changes with arpeggios like this, you could try to replace that critical note right here. So that second upstroke on the B string, where I would have to play an upstroke and then switch to a downstroke on the G string. Instead of doing that, you could just hammer on the neck like this. So with my middle finger, I'm just hammering on the neck like this to get the note. I'm doing absolutely nothing with my picking hand right here. And by doing this, I save a lot of time because I can reposition my pick while that hammer-on is happening to be in the perfect position for the downstroke on the G string. And doing this and training this, so replacing certain picking strokes with hammered notes in the arpeggio, can get you results like this at a faster tempo. Super elitists might call that cheating, but what I care about the most is that the arpeggio sounds very clean, fluid, fast and effortless. So I do really like to use this approach sometimes for very tricky kind of arpeggio shapes that aren't always played exclusively ascending or descending. And the last extremely helpful tip I wanted to show you concerns getting rid of those individual picking strokes. I think this is the main frustration for most players. So you're practicing the arpeggio very slowly to a metronome. And then watching the practice footage, you can see that you're individually attacking the strings, just like I did it right now. You were hoping to see a movement like that, where you're elegantly sweeping, but you always have those individual strokes. What can you do about that? So sweeping at very, very slow tempos feels super awkward because it's actually no problem at all to attack the strings individually. So that's how most players would actually play a slow arpeggio. Sweep picking is a technique that you only kind of use as soon as things get faster. So when I was practicing at very slow tempos, I had a really hard time getting rid of those individual small picking movements. What did the trick for me was not being afraid to push beyond what I could do at this point. So I dared to sound sloppy in my routine, like this, for example. So I did get stuck in between the strings. It wasn't exactly in time. There was a ton of string noise. But by doing that, I slowly got a feeling for how that movement should actually feel at faster tempos. And I personally think it would have never clicked for me if I started at 40 beats per minute, working on getting rid of that, then increasing the tempo 1 BPM at a time or in 5 BPM steps. I really had to go for those fast and sloppy tempos right away, even though it sounded terrible. But over weeks and months, this connection in my brain slowly formed and I finally got rid of those individual strokes forever. Now with this video, of course, I'm just scratching the surface when it comes to sweep picking. Now that you know some of my best tips, what you really need are the best exercises to actually practice those. My awesome guitar students on Patreon have access to my full 30-day sweep picking course that takes you from the absolute essentials and basic arpeggios all the way to really cool practical arpeggio workout tunes that you can practice every day. People that start the course on day 1 absolutely cannot sweep yet, and on day 30 they're suddenly posting the craziest sweep picking arpeggios with a great sounding and great looking technique already. 40,000 players finished this course already on Patreon. They all got amazing results, so the structure and formula of this 30-day program clearly works. So if you enjoyed the tips of this video and you really want to learn to sweep pick once and for all, I can get you there in just 30 days. All you have to do is click the link down below, sign up on Patreon, and get started with the 30-day sweep picking course right away. I'm waiting for you on Patreon. See you over there. Have an amazing day, and bye bye.